If you love the West Tigers as much as we do, and that's an awful lot, you're welcome to come and join us in our discussions on the West Tigers podcast forum. Our forum is the #1 forum for West Tigers fans to talk everything West Tigers. westtigerspodcast.com.au/forum. We hope to see you there soon. The West Tigers podcast, and although I'm not officially counting anymore, at least on the titles of the podcasts, I believe we've got a pretty big milestone coming up. It'll be the 400th edition of the West Tigers podcast next edition. So the weekend edition will be the big 400, and that makes this one 399 if my maths is correct. And Declan and Steve are here, and I just wanted to say straight off that last episode of the West Tigers podcast, episode 398, gave me a new highlight. So out of the 398 editions of the West Tigers podcast that have been recorded, there was a new highlight, and that was Eddie saying that God watches a lot of rugby league. And I don't know about you guys, but that certainly raised an image in my head of a man with a white beard sitting on the lounge watching KO and watching a lot of rugby league. And that does surpass the Ken Marmalade from a few years ago, which was my previous high of the West Tigers podcast. So on that note, hello, Steve. How are you? Eddie does come out with a perler every now and then.
Yeah, well, it sort of answers a question for us. Now, when he goes missing, well, we have always sort of thought he's been off on some debaucherous, session, but he's been at a retreat, or he's been off in the Himalayas praying and finding his inner self. He's a holy man.
Yeah, he is. But he doesn't have a lot of faith, which is interesting, because as soon as one thing goes against the West Tigers, tends to sort of the wheels fall off the Eddie faith.
Maybe he takes after Judas.
Maybe, yes, exactly. All right, we've got a lot to talk about. None of us got a chance to talk about the great West Tigers, all wins are great, but the West Tigers win over the Dragons. I do like beating the Dragons. I do like beating the Eels, so any win against the Dragons is great. The boys on the weekend had a good chat about it. They did mention my word, which was Terrell Davis-May, who I thought had a fantastic game. What were your impressions of the game, Steve? To me, I thought we were really, really good in the first half, and then we looked really tired in the second half. I think that extra time game against the Sharks, travelling to Brisbane, a few things, there was still probably some knock-on emotional exhaustion from the Galvin thing. Like that, to me, looks like we started really well, but as the game wore on, we were just sort of holding in there.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that off the top, Joel, because I watched the game with Gary. We went to a pub to watch the game, and I actually turned to him at about the 60-minute mark and said, "We're looking really tired. I think that extra time is coming to get us a little bit." So yeah, interesting you felt the same. What were my thoughts? So I got a couple of one words. One is 80 minutes, and that's got to be our focus now, being able to play good football for 80 minutes. We're definitely a team on the build, and we're showing signs of being a top 8 side, but we're not showing it for 80 minutes. So I think that's probably the next step we need to take. But the other one, which I think is just as important, is winning ugly. We haven't been able to win ugly. We haven't been able to win, right? But now we can win ugly, and we shouldn't have won that game. Really, you could say we shouldn't have won the Cronulla game, but we did, which means we should have won it because we did win it. We found a way to win both those games, and we got 4 points over the 2 weeks. So yeah, that would never have happened in our past.
Declan, I've got written here in my notes just as a little summary of that second half. I don't think that's a real, as Steve said, we hung in there, we got the result, we managed to find a way to nail it and to get there in the end and get the 2 points. But I don't think that was an indication of where West Tigers are truly at. And the reason why I'm saying that is I look at the odds for this week's game against Melbourne, and I think they're judging us on that second half, but I think there were some factors. The first half, I thought we were fantastic. There was depth in attack. There was multiple attacking options. We had no trouble scoring points again. That was actually the eighth game in a row we've scored more than 20 points, which is unheard of for the West Tigers in the last few years where we've really struggled. Where do you think we're at? I mean, you can look at Richo's meter, I suppose. Like, how would you... I would say that we were good in that first half and average to poor in the second half.
I mean, I think that you got to be happy with where we're at right now in the season. Like, if anyone said we're in the top 8 after Magic Round, I think we all would have taken that, to be honest. So it's just great from that perspective, just to have those wins in the bank. And we're actually nearly close to our total wins from last year. So that's a good sign, isn't it? But I think that for the Dragons, I think because we scored a few quick tries in succession, plus that Buller try at the end, and we had such momentum, I think that the team kind of came out not complacent, but maybe just kind of going through the motions a little bit, because we did end up on top, like pretty clearly in the end of the first half, and then the Dragons managed to score those 2 quick tries, and then suddenly we're in the back foot. I also think that it was a bit of a matchup thing as well, because the entire first half, every time that Valentine Holmes got the ball, they found space, or they managed to penetrate the game line, put us off, which was like a real worry. But then Luciano Leilua came on as well, on that edge, on Holmes' edge as well, and he was just a matchup nightmare for us as well. So I feel like that made that the first 20 minutes of the second half, I feel like those two in particular really caused us a lot of trouble, because they managed to just offload and make the game line, fast play the balls. But I think in saying that though, I feel like we did enough to sway the momentum. I think I said it live. I thought Jerome Buller's catch on Gutherson that led to the captain's challenge, although he didn't score, I thought that was a massive momentum turner, because it gave us more possession on our line, and we ended up walking away with 2 points, and that kind of just quelled the Dragons' kind of run a little bit. I think that if he didn't do that, I feel like they would have still had momentum. And it wasn't pretty, but as Steve said, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day as long as you win. And I feel like last year especially, we definitely would have lost that game. There's so many times last year where we played so well for 60 minutes or even 70 minutes sometimes, but then just a small period of time where the other team just got back into it would cost us the game. So on that alone, you can't be too critical, and you have to be happy that they stuck with it.
What was great about that first half, from my perspective, was they went up 6-0, then we came back at 6-all. Then they went up 12-6, and we came back at 6-10, 10-12, sorry. And then we jumped ahead and went to 16-12, I think. Then again, so even if you take that Buller try out of it, that ability to rebound off adversity is something we've never been good at. And we've shown that a lot so far this season, that a team scoring early is not the death knell for us now that it was. We can come back from it. I will say I agree with you, Declan. I don't know whether it's complacency or not. And it goes to my one word, I suppose. But we just have these dead spots in games. I was going to say moments, but it's not moments. It's longer than moments. This season we've tended to start slow. Our first 20 minutes we haven't dominated, I don't think, in the first 20 minutes in any game this year that I can remember. I'm saying that off the top of my head. And then that happened again in the second half. And you might be right, it might be complacency, I don't know. But we should have gone at 26-10 at half time. We should have just come out and nailed them. And the game should have been over. And to counter the fact that we were going to tire because of the 3 games in 13 days or whatever it was, plus the extra time game, we were going to tire. The game should have been dead and buried by the 60-minute mark. But for whatever reason, we came out just so flat in that second half. We've got to get rid of those flat periods in our game. And we'll talk about this later, I'm sure. But if we have a flat period on Sunday, the game will be gone before we blink.
Yeah, I think just on Declan's point about Luciano Leilua, Galvin would have been having nightmares. He was having a lot of trouble with, and obviously Luciano was targeting Galvin, and definitely a bit of a mismatch there. The thing that I liked, and I agree with you about that, Steve, is that in every game, pretty much, maybe 95% of games, you have a moment where it starts to go against you. And we've spoken for 5 or 6 or 8 years about the West Tigers getting to those Y junctions in a game and the wheels tending to fall off. And this year, we just tend to absorb it and regroup and come back and find a way. And it's just great to see that difference. The other thing I liked, Declan, was that the Dragons, if you go back to that game at Campbelltown last year, I was out there and really, really impressed by the physical presence of the Dragons. Like, they're a big side. Even Little has put on muscle, and you can see that Flanagan's going for that. But we're starting to be able to, I don't know how sustainable it is necessarily, but we're not just getting blown away by teams that come with that big, powerful physical game. And that's what I'm liking, that we tend to have that little bit of a adaptability where once upon a time we just couldn't go with those sides at all. So I think that's another area of improvement as well.
Yeah, I think our forward pack probably massively underrated amongst others in the competition, because although we're not probably as big as the Dragons, I think in terms of just consistency, I think we're probably up there in terms of defensive attitude. Like, Terrell May is obviously getting all the reps in a row, but I feel like all the other forwards, I think Seyfarth, 12, all these guys get through a mountain of work. And although like we give away a little bit in the size that manage, I think that like it's come a long way this season. And I also think that a big impact as well as the bench, because we can bring in quality like Sione Fainu and Royce Hunt when other teams don't necessarily have that quality on the bench. So I think maybe that's why we see that we can sometimes separate a little bit when after that like 25-minute mark. But yeah, I think it's I think defensively it's improved out of sight this season. And yeah, even like Adam Dewar, like even some of the outside, obviously Nathan's the exception because like, probably didn't have his best game. But I feel like besides him, like our centers especially have just the defensive decisions they make have just come on leaps and bounds. Where even if a team like with big outside backs like the Dragon, if we're playing them, then you kind of expect our backs to handle it, if that makes sense. And I think the Dragons have actually had a bit of an underrated season as well. I mean, they beat the Storm, they lost to Parramatta, mind you, but they were in the same like spot in the ladder as us, like same points exactly, I think. So to like beat them, I think it's a pretty good indication of where we're going, because they were kind of sitting at the same kind of win-loss ratio that we were. So, and I actually thought they put some pretty good passages to play together. It's kind of like the Sharks game where they played quite well, but we still managed to win. I think the Dragons, although their first half was pretty bad, I thought they did put some good plays together in the second half, but we still managed to come away with it.
I reckon we did hold them, but I'd have to say only just. Like, watching the game, I just felt at any stage they were just going to rip straight through our defensive line. Yeah, we held on by the skin of our teeth, I thought, a number of times. And the two things that stuck out for me that the team needs to work on, I reckon, is our first contact. Like, we're a lot of times against the Dragons, they're big guys. The first contact, we'd bounce off. And they may not have maintained momentum, but they could bounce off and go again, if you know what I mean. You know, like at some stages when first contact is poor, they just go straight through the line. But even when we managed to slow them down, like our first contact would bounce off and they'd stop, but they'd go again. But worse than that was the second phase play we allowed, that when we didn't wrap the ball up. I haven't looked at the stats, so I don't know what the offload count was, but in the game, they seem to be getting a fair amount of second phase play where I remember shouting at the TV a few times, wrap the ball, you know, we just weren't able to get in there and wrap that ball up. And St. George can be really dangerous off that, well, most teams can be, off that second phase, you know, come again at you.
Yeah, no, it comes back to that physicality. I know exactly what you're saying, Steve, and I agree. Like, that's why I use the word sustainable. Like, eventually you're going to run into a team that's able to sort of better capitalise on their moments. The thing with the West Tigers in terms of that period after halftime, again, like I've got here in my notes, we conceded two penalties in the first set after halftime. Like, we defended quite well, but we just seemed to come out with the wrong attitude. The Dragons bombed a try-scoring opportunity. We did get a penalty. And then Jack Bird comes on, and his first tackle, he gives a 6 again. Like, eventually those little moments will probably cost us against a team that's better able to capitalise on the opportunities, is the point that I'm getting to, Declan. And that's why this game against the Storm is such a litmus test, albeit the Storm a little bit weakened. But in terms of working out where you're at, go to Melbourne, play them in Melbourne. Like it's going to tell us a lot, I think.
I don't know. I could do without that test, to be honest. I'd be feeling much better about it if we played a bit like last year. But yeah, look, I think I think we would all be lying if we didn't think that the draw was a bit generous. Like we have had some tough games. I'm not saying it's been an easy kind of walkout, but we haven't played like a lot of like really good teams back to back to back. We have played some of the teams that are probably going to finish like lower in the ladder than us, or maybe like pushing for the top 8. But yeah, like obviously the Storm at Melbourne Park, that's going to be tough. And yeah, it's not so much their forward pack that worries me. Like I think we can match it with them if we come up with the right energy. It's more their backline that I'm just a little bit scared of, because as you said, like I just remember watching the Warriors game before the ambush event, and they just turned like even quarter chances into tries that game. Maybe they just had the spiders on them, but like they can just score out of anywhere and score tries that other teams can't, which probably goes to your point about like we need to be better at like stopping these kind of half chances, because the better teams will take advantage of them, because the Storm are going to take advantage of like half chances. We just have to make sure we limit them as much as possible. Because it's weird, because I actually think the Storm this season are more vulnerable than they have been in the past seasons, because they've been run down twice now by teams, by the Raiders and by the Dolphins, after like, I think the Dolphins were losing by 18 points at one time. So that's almost unheard of by the Storm. So like, they're definitely not invincible, but they're looking pretty good.
Yeah. Well, Harry Grant's not going to be playing. Jerome Hughes under an injury cloud. So that's an interesting one. Steve, beating Melbourne in Melbourne is something that the West Tigers have done on a couple of occasions. And you could see that we've gone, if you remember back, I think when Cleary was the coach, I think might have been the last time we won down there. But we really went with a game plan, and that game plan was to do exactly what Declan was just saying, which is basically, have more possession, complete your sets, discipline, take your opportunities. Do you think that we'll go with that sort of shut them down, ambush type approach? Because really, and I was just thinking about this when you guys were talking, the West Tigers this year, to a large degree, are playing Tim Sheen's ball. Well, Dragons, you can score 28, but we're going to score 34. Like, it's hard to know which West Tigers team and what the strategy is for this game.
Look, I think we've got to play our own game, and we're starting to move the ball well, and it's starting to be more cohesive. I don't think we want to shut that down. We've got to play the game that's going to allow us to score points. Melbourne are going to score points. If we're going to win, we've got to score more than them, right? So we can't shut our game plan down and go back to that 5 up and kick that we saw early in the season, because that won't cut it against Melbourne. But I do agree with you. And I've actually, it's funny, when you were just speaking there, I was just reading through what I've got written down here, and it's pretty much the same thing. Canberra went up against the Storm. Canberra playing some red hot football, right? Canberra went up against the Storm, threw absolutely everything at them, and managed to get on top of them in the 84th minute or 80, whatever it was, right? In extra time. They are so hard to get on top of. What we have to do is go and play our game. There's no glaring weaknesses in the Storm. You can't sort of say, like, we're going to attack the halves, or we're going to beat them through the middle or around the ruck. Like, they are strong across the park. So the only way to beat them really is to play down their end of the field, put pressure on them, wait for them to make mistakes, and make sure we don't make many mistakes. Which is what you just said, right? It needs to be an 80-minute performance that we haven't. And that's why I said what I said at the top of the show. I said, one of our goals now needs to be 80 minutes. Like, we've played really well in patches. We've played well enough to be in the top 8, after 9 rounds. Now we've got to say, righto, we need an 80-minute performance. It just needs to be disciplined. I saw a stat with those high tackles that we were the 3rd most penalised team in high tackles. So, and when we're usually high up in the penalties against and the six against also. So we really need to be as disciplined as we can to make sure we're controlling the narrative of the game. We're not allowing the Storm to, because if we give them too much ball, cheap ball, we turn ball over in good position for them, they'll cane us. 80 minutes, Joel, is what it is.
Should be a good battle of the fullbacks, Declan. Buller is in white-hot form. He's been so impressive this year, especially the last month, and we all know what Pappenhausen can do. I mean, there's some good matchups, actually. Terrell May versus Stefano, Munster and Luai. I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to be a pretty close game.
Oh, I'd love to show you optimism. I don't know. I think just the demons of old, and then Eddie just like getting in our faces about how we're going to get pumped. I don't know.
Eddie says that every week.
That's true. He does. I think that the matchup that I'm most scared about is the combination of Hughes and Katoa. Because I remember last year when we played them at Leichhardt, I felt that we were really on top. But then they just managed to get like a few passes, like a few short passes between each other. And we conceded a short try, and then it kind of undid all the work that we did. So hopefully this time it's different. But I think if Hughes was like carrying a shoulder injury, I just hope they rest him for this week, because if he's such a good player for them. I think like Pappenhausen and Munster, I agree with you. I think that we've got players that can match them. And I think Terrell May's just had a much better season than Stefano. I don't think it's even close. I was gobsmacked when I saw that Stefano's name was in those predicted Origin teams in New South Wales. Obviously, that's a bit clickbait, but yeah, it's just I don't think he's done anything close to warranting being in that conversation. But I think Jerome Hughes is the one that he's a difference maker, I reckon. I think there's no one on the field quite like him, and he's the one I'd be worried about going into the game.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always a risk when you've got your halfback that's got an injury cloud as well. I mean, do you rest them? Do you risk them? We'll have to wait and see what they do. Steve, 3 in a row, the elusive 3 in a row. 2018 was the last time the West Tigers won 3 games in a row. And there'd be a whole stack of West Tigers fans that had never seen 3 in a row, let alone be able to remember it. But we need to stay at 50%. This is one that we would have penciled in as maybe not. If we could get the points here, going into the bye, South struggling. I think I actually think we're going to win. I'm pretty confident that we're going to win, or at least go really, really close.
It's a winnable game. Melbourne Storm are not invincible yet. No. They are. I know when I'm in tipping comps, I've always had the rule: always tip the Storm no matter what. Right? They are the elite team. Despite Penrith winning it 4 out of 5, Melbourne are the elite team in the competition for the last decade. Right? Their ability to win when it matters is just unparalleled. I don't like the fact that we're getting them coming off a loss. I think that probably, if Hughes is 50-50, I think that puts an end to the fact that he might sit out. Bellamy will want them to bounce back from a loss. We're coming up to the State of Origin period where Melbourne do tend to get hammered a little bit, so he's going to want money in the bank before the State of Origin period. So I think if Hughes is 50-50, if he's 51-49, he'll be playing, because they're going to want the 2 points. But I have faith in this team now, in this Tigers team that I haven't had in the past. I do believe we can compete with Melbourne, and if we play disciplined, and if we have good line speed in defence, and watch the Hugheses of the world and Pappenhausen and those blokes and stay up on them and don't give them space, if we respect the football and play the game in their half, we can pressure Melbourne, we can panic them a little bit. If we need a good start, right? We need a good first 20. They can remember that game a couple of years ago where it was like 20-0 after 10 minutes, right? Melbourne just went whack, whack, whack. We've got to start strong. We haven't started strong all year, so there's all these little goals that we haven't been able to achieve yet. 80-minute performance, first 20 minutes. They're going to be working on those all week and just ramming it home to do those things well, tick those boxes, and if we do it, I think we can at least compete with them, at least.
Yeah, I'd rather not be able to remember that game, but that was on the Sunshine Coast. And
we were at an ambush event, and I remember saying to everyone at half time, who wants to watch a movie?
Yeah. Oh, that was bleak. That was very bleak. Well, the one thing I like, look, the other thing is that, and it's interesting you say that, Steve, Bellamy coming off a loss and he wants to bank it another 2 points before Origin. To me, that kind of feels like there's a little bit more pressure on them than there is on us. Like, nobody's expecting us to do anything. There is no pressure on us. We're probably not going to have anybody in Origin, maybe one player, maybe two at the most. Like, there's no pressure on us. So that's a pretty good thing. So we just have to wait and see. The other thing is, if I'm an opposition fan or an opposition coach, I'm thinking to myself, okay, because we're doing it with Munster and Pappenhausen and blah, blah, blah. But, you're thinking about the West Tigers this week. We've got to shut down Buller. We've got to shut down Luai. We've got to shut down Api Coruscant. We've got, Taruva will finish any try-scoring opportunities that come up. You know what I'm saying? Like, we've got those multiple threats now. And it's a different playground, I think. And that's why I'm pretty hopeful. So it would be lovely to get that 3 in a row off our back. Be nice.
Can I mention one thing that does worry me? And this is ghosts of past. But what is it about ex-Tigers players? Like, really, these guys that have left our club just must have hated the club. Because every time we play an ex-Tigers player, they just play out of their skin. And I'm just dreading the thought of Stefano for the first time all season running like 150 metres or something and doing that offload that he can do close to the line and Pappenhausen running off him under the post. Like, he hasn't done it all year. Just hope we can shut him down.
Well,
ex-players seem to want to stick it to us. Sorry.
Well, like, from a tactical point of view, I think that the Tigers could be banking on getting Stefano to bite in on a little bit of niggle, because obviously the penalty he gave away against the Raiders, but it's going to be an emotional game for him, and I don't know, he just kind of seems a little bit ill-disciplined. He was like that last year as well, and I think that maybe just playing his ex-team, I would be targeting him if I was the Tigers. I'd be just chucking him the whole game. I reckon he's got a bit of a brain explosion in him, especially with all the high tackle crackdowns. Now, maybe we'll get some reward from it, hopefully.
And if I could do the opposite to what you're saying, Steve, basically, isn't that exactly what the West Tigers are? Like, you've got these players that perform at 5 or 6 when they're with us, and then they get the occasional 7 or 8 or 9, and then they leave, and then they're playing at another club at that same level, the 5 or 6. They face us. They have their good game. Like, that's because they're ex-West Tigers players. You watch those guys, I know exactly who you're talking about. I know exactly the situations. And you watch them the next week and they're back to their standard play. They just pull that big one out against us, which is what we have done traditionally as a club, where we're ordinary, good performance, ordinary. So, yeah, that's West Tigers players. Melbourne are also, if you look at my rule of 4, what have they got? 2 ex-West Tigers players. Ryan Pappenhausen, a smidge, because he played in the under-20s. It's when you start getting up to that 3 or 4, that's when typically I feel more confident. But anyway, should we do buy, sell and hold?
Yes.
I'm not going to be as stringent with the rules as Eddie used to be anyway. Or should I call it the good, bad and the ugly, just to honour Gary here?
Yeah, where is Eddie? He always gives us rubbish about not coming on, but he's the host of the Wednesday night pod and he's nowhere to be seen.
He's in Nepal.
Yeah, he's at church.
All right, buy, sell, hold. West Tigers should give Dewey a 2-year contract. Steve, it was mentioned on the Sunday night show with Eddie about giving Dewey a renewal. What's your thought on a couple of years for Dewey?
No, I'm selling that. If you had said 12 months and let's see what happens, I'd probably be okay. But at this stage, I don't think I'd be offering him a 2-year extension. It's hard, right? It's hard because, there's a lot of Adam Dewey that is just fantastic. He is all heart, and I think he genuinely loves the jersey, and he plays with his heart on his sleeve, and I think other players react to that. But I think we need better in the centres. I think we need more attacking. I was going to say defensive consistency, but he's actually improved that this year. But we do need more attacking weapons. Maybe if we get a red hot, maybe if we signed Fafita, for example, to play on an edge, then you could maybe have the discussion. Well, then can we keep Dewey because we've just improved our attack out wide? Maybe then, but at the moment I'd be saying no, not 2 years.
We'll talk about Fafita shortly. I've got him on my list of topics to talk about. Declan, I've seen you under the NC Latcham Robinson stand at Leichhardt with your West Tigers number 6 Dewey jersey on. Are you selling that as well? You wouldn't give him 2 years?
I would give him 2 years on the understanding that he's a centre, not a 6. If he's kind of, like there were some reports that he wanted to sign at a club that would view him as a half. I think that those days are probably over for him. In fact, they're definitely over. I think that the Eels game was a confirmation that he's probably just not that player anymore. And yeah, I would give him a 2-year deal at centre. I don't think there wouldn't be any promises that he'd be starting centre every single week if someone else came along that was better. And I think that the long-term left edge centre is going to be Macassini coming through the grades. I think that's who they've earmarked for that position. So I don't really see the problem in giving Adam Dewey a 2-year deal. So by the time that runs out, Macassini will be ready to take that spot. And then, Dewey, he's also a goal kicker as well. So he's got that versatility. He's got the goal kicking ability, and he can slot into the halves next time, Galvin's manager decides to, throw a bomb in the middle of the week. So yeah, he's just got that versatility. Obviously, it depends on how much money as well. I wouldn't be getting in a bidding war with anyone for him. But yeah, I'll give him a 2-year extension.
I also reckon, from what we've seen this year, that if we're talking about looking after the guys that we've got at the moment, then Stafford Toa needs to be the number one priority from the centres at the very least. Ahead of Dewey, ahead of Naden. Macassini coming through, but he's untested, right, at this stage. But maybe he's going to be a star. We don't really know. But what I'm seeing from Stafford Toa, it's what I talked about in the pod last week. I said that all these new guys are not only playing well for us, they're bringing the best out in guys we already had in the club. And I just think the improvements we're seeing in Stafford Toa's game, and we're starting to see some consistency in his play. I think he could hold down a centre spot at the Tigers for, as long as he wants to be here, really.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the West Tigers podcast. Don't forget, if you agree or disagree, we'd love to hear your comments and thoughts on the West Tigers podcast forum. It's free to join and you can contribute directly to the podcast on the forum. Just head to westtigerspodcast.com.au/forum. We hope to see you there soon.
Yeah, so Toa comes off contract at the end of 2026, so he can't talk to anyone else until November 1st. So, yeah, I think that it might be a good time right now while he's in form to try and upgrade him, add a few more years onto that. Which is so funny as well because I feel like that at the start of the year, if someone said you can get rid of Stafford Toa to free up cap space, we probably all would have said, I'm interested in that. So it just shows you how he's come leaps and bounds. And I just think that's do you reckon that's the Luai effect or the Benji effect where someone who none of us really rated too highly is just cut, and now we're talking about extending him before he comes off contract in November 1st. It's just it's a big turn of events.
He's always impressed and looked like he's had the opportunity, he's got the ability.
One game at a time. It's I've never seen him string this many good games together.
Yeah, well, unfortunately he's injured again, but that sort of has been the issue, is that he hasn't been able to string a lot of games together because of hamstring or different injuries. But yeah, it's absolutely right. It was one of the things that we discussed over the off season really intently was who do we play in the centres, and Stafford Toa seemed to be way down the pecking order. He's done really well, Steve.
Yeah, well, he hasn't strung good games together. He's, as you're right, he had that one game against North Queensland where he ripped through Valentine Holmes multiple times. But apart from that, he's only shown moments. But those moments have shown that he did have something. He just had to be able to put it together. Now, whether that's because of he hasn't been able to because of injury, or whether it's because of his mental strength and toughness and playing in a squad that's not achieving. I don't know. Probably a bit of everything. I don't reckon it's just the Luai factor, but Luai's got a lot to do with it. I just think it's all the new guys have come into the club with an attitude. Everyone around the club that was already here has risen to that attitude, and there's a new culture. And therefore, these players that were average are now, if we want to use the Richo meter, right, that were performing middle of the road, are now getting above that consistently. It's culture. Culture's so important.
I've got a culture one next for the next question, but just on centres, choice between, I think I know which way you're going to go, choice between Dewey or Naden in 2026?
Dewey, for sure.
Yeah, I'd have to say Dewey, yeah.
Yeah, I think Naden's time in the NRL might be coming to an end. I think Super League might be beckoning for Brent Naden, unfortunately. Culture. West Tigers culture has been overhauled by the 2025 recruits. We've been waiting for the culture to change. We've been waiting for a shift. Declan, have the Luais and the Taruvas and the Mays, have they changed West Tigers?
Yeah, by that 100%. I think that Benji Marshall, I think he deserves a lot of credit for this, and he's been here like long term, not long term, but like he's been here for the last few years. But I think there's just it makes such a difference when the players are driving the standard, and you can just tell how much Benji like connects with, especially Luai. I mean, Luai made that perfectly clear from the first moment that he announced he was coming to the Tigers, that it was his connection with Benji Marshall that signed him, like got him over the line to come to us. So I think that just having the players that can like implement, Benji's messages on the field and the kind of like team camaraderie and that culture, and then also bring their own culture from Penrith especially, I think that's it's just completely night and day to what we saw last year. And it's the proof in the pudding. We have like players like, Alex Twelve, Stafford, Alex Seyfarth, like who, like had good games in them, but just were nowhere near as consistent as they are now. And that's coming along with like whole team performances as well, where, we've all said we haven't really played our best in many games this year, but just the floor of our performances have just been amazing, which is great to see. So I think that's just an indication that the new guys coming in have just completely refreshing the culture.
Steve, your observations from the outside in, like it feels different.
I agree with what Declan just said, 100%. But I don't want to minimise the impact that I think Benji Marshall and the coaching staff have had on that development of culture. I don't think they could do it before these new guys came in. I think they needed these guys in there to drive the standards that they're driving. But it is obvious to me now. I mentioned, I don't know if you remember or not, but I mentioned in a pod really, probably in the pre-season, right? I just went to the season launch, and Benji Marshall gave a speech at the season launch, and he just stood up in front of everyone there and just said, "You know what? Last year a lot of it was on me. And I've had to go away and really think about it and make changes." And as I said back then, he didn't tell us what those changes were. Well, obviously he's not going to say that. But it is so obvious that he's come back with a stillness he didn't have before, and a toughness in expectation and driving standards that he didn't have before that is there now. Now, I reckon that blokes like Jerome Luai and Appy, who couldn't do it on his own, that they would be applauding that, and together, because they're all doing it together now, they can drive those standards successfully. So yeah, it is the players that have come in, but I think Benji Marshall and his team have had a lot to do with it.
Benji's personality and approach will be factored into a discussion about David Fafita in just a moment. But I got one more, which is slightly down the more negative side of the scale, and I'll throw it back to you, Steve. Buy, sell, hold. A lack of depth will eventually end our finals hopes this year.
Oh, Joel. Yeah, look, I have to buy it. I have to buy it because we are capable of making the eight. I think we have to have an expectation that we will make the eight. I think we're playing like a team that can make the eight and do okay once we get there. But if we get a few injuries, and it doesn't have to be many, we're in big trouble. We don't have the depth, and we lose a front rower, a back rower. We lose Luai at one of the halves. We're in. Well, halves were probably actually okay if we lost one, but it wouldn't take much for us to have some fairly big holes in our team.
Declan, it looks pretty thin, doesn't it, once you start getting past player 19?
Well, sorry, Declan. Can I just finish there? The thing that I used to really concern me was getting to that 25-minute mark in a game, and we'd start to sub players on, and the lack of impact was just startling. Right now, we get 25 minutes in, and we actually go up a gear. Right, we actually get better because our bench is so strong. I reckon we've got one of the most impactful benches in the competition. But we lose one of those blokes, or one of those guys has to come into the starting team, and one of the guys from reserve grade come back and sit on the bench, and we lose all that impact.
Yeah. I think that, although depth is scarce, I would argue that besides the very top teams, it's scarce for everyone. I mean, the more teams that the NRL introduces into the competition, the more it's going to be hard to build top 30 squads that are full of first graders, because the minute someone in reserve grade is playing really well, they're going to find an opportunity in first grade somewhere else. So that just dilutes the talent. So I think that although especially in the outside backs, you would just love not to have someone like Brent Naden, playing. But unfortunately, we just I feel harsh saying that. It's probably a really harsh thing to say. But we just don't really have that quality depth at the moment, and we also don't really have that many. I don't know, young players that are ready to take someone's position at the moment either. I know that Luke Lilly, we have raps on him, but he probably didn't take his chance as well as he could have against the Eels, which is a little bit annoying. Understandable because he still is quite young.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't have that experience depth, but then we also don't have a lot of young players putting pressure at the moment on the people we're currently at, which is a little bit unideal, to be fair.
Yeah, Luke Lilly, probably another couple of years, I'd say, before he really hits his straps. But seems to have plenty of talent there and seems to have good confidence. So he's one to watch. Let's move on to David Fafita. Declan, we've had this scenario a few times before. I think Tavita Pangai Jr. comes to mind. A good thing... who was it you had the big fight with on the pod about Tavita Pangai? Was that Gary?
It was Gary, yeah.
Gary, yeah. I want to know what you think about the West Tigers signing David Fafita to play on the left-hand side, his preferred side, with Jerome Luai, shifting Samuel Afenu over to the right. Are you in favour of this potential?
I mean, I think on paper it fits perfectly. Our team is quite settled in terms of our spine players. That yes, we're going to lose Galvin, but by all reports, we're kind of hearing that Latu Fainu is going to replace him anyway. So we've got the replacement within the squad. So unless Latu is not the long-term solution to Galvin leaving, then I think we have some sort of money to splash. And if I was to spend it on any sort of position, it would be an edge back rower at the moment, because I've said before, I think that Makasini's going to be a really good player for us when he comes to grade. And then Safato is obviously locked down that right side. And you got Taruva, Skelton, who are really good wing players as well. So I feel like if we're going to pick one position that we could upgrade, it would be a back rower. And I think Dave Fafita is probably one of the most naturally talented back rowers that I've ever seen. And he just brings that game-breaking ability. So on paper, it fits really, really well. Now, I think the thing that we're all kind of worried a little bit about is the fact that could this be a poison chalice of someone who's just naturally gifted, but when push comes to shove, just isn't going to play in a winning team because he doesn't have the mindset and the culture to be able to fit into one of these really successful organizations. Now, I've I have a few Titans friends, so I watch a fair few of their games, and I don't necessarily think that David Villa is he has like a poor attitude or like he's poor culturally. I think that he's just a follower in terms of a personality, and I think that someone like Des Hasler, with his communication style, kind of old school, a bit up and down in terms of like how he communicates. Like that story about how he dropped him to reserve grade. I just think that someone of Fafita's age, Polynesian background, probably a little bit shy, not like great with conflict. I think that Benji Marshall and Jerome Loai would be really, really good for him. I think that it is a little bit worrying because, like how many, like we're finally at a point where we can all agree our culture is really, really good. So, like, should we try and continue that and only bring in guys that we know are going to be good cultural fits, or do we take a swing on a guy that's not really going to set the standard culturally, but it's probably going to win us a few games? Like, I could see it going either way, and then it also just depends on the money as well, doesn't it? Like, how much are the Titans going to chip in? Is that ankle injury? How bad is that? Does he even want to move down to Sydney? Because it just seems like every time he calls for a contract, he's always linked to a Sydney team, but he's always chosen to stay in Queensland. So, like, is he even interested in making the move down? But if I was like the ultimate decider in this and I could make it happen, I would take the punt because I think he's just too talented, and I think that we've got the players in place already at the club, and we've got the kind of coach that can reach him and get him to his full potential.
Steve, as Declan has said there quite rightly, we on the shopping list has been an impactful edge back rower. He fits the bill that way, but it's just so hard to know what the truth is. Like, I think the ankle injury is a smokescreen. I think that just took the pressure off the Titans so that he didn't have to play in Queensland Cup, just say he's got a bit of an injury. But the other side of it is it a worry to see someone who has been so out of form just because he's unhappy? Like, it's just so many things and so many questions that we don't know. But on the basis of the theory is I'd love to have him here. He can be an astoundingly good forward.
Just on his injury, I heard tonight on 360 that he's scheduled for surgery on that ankle. So if it's a smokescreen, geez, they're going to some length.
Yeah, that's right. Amputation would be the ultimate
maybe
smokescreen.
There's a little bit more to it. Look, just on, I agree, we need an edge back row really badly. Look, I haven't seen anything from this guy from Newcastle, this Pierce Paul. I've watched him with interest a couple of times and haven't seen him do much, apart from seeing that he's a big body and he could be damaging. But I listened to Andrea Johns talk about him, who just thinks the world of him and thinks he's going to be the next big thing. And if Andrea Johns has that opinion of him, that's pretty well good enough for me. And I look at our team. We've got a young team, full of blokes that are developing their skills, and we seem to be all going in the right direction together. I just think if a young bloke like Pierce Paul would fit at West Tigers maybe better than Fafita. And it is hard because Fafita at his best is unstoppable, right? But do we take the risk? And I don't know. I reckon at this stage, and I think Pierce Paul's a right edge player too, which means we wouldn't need to move Sam Fainu from the left to the right as well. I reckon I'd be, if that's a real and proper thing that Pierce Paul might be negotiating with him, I reckon I'd be going that way ahead of Fafita.
Like, I think that I would be happy with either, to be honest, because I think they both fill like what we're after. But I think that if I'm to look at like the modern day forward, like Pierce Paul, he's like very big and rangy, and like not like particularly like stocky. And I just think the way the modern like forward is, that Fafita is so like built perfectly because he's just like massive. He's like the Hulk, probably the most equivalent player to someone who's like just huge and like built on the legs and just powerful. So I think if I was to choose between like, you have to pay like $800K for Fafita, or you have to pay like $650 for Kai Pierce Paul, I think I would just rather spend extra money on Fafita. But I would honestly be happy with either because, as Steve said, like the Knights player, he's a right edge. Like he probably fits a little bit more straight into the team. Like, he would be a little bit cheaper, so we could maybe throw that money somewhere else as well. But I think we could really use either, to be honest.
The funny thing is if Benji can keep getting results, then I think he becomes an attraction for the club for players to want to come and play under him. Just as they've wanted to do for Bennett for many years, where Bennett doesn't micromanage them, he just works with them as men. And you've got guys like Adam O'Brien and Des Hasler who are really intense, really, really structured coaches. And I think for some players that just doesn't work, Declan.
Yeah, I mean, May's just the poster boy, isn't it, for that? Like someone who came to the Roosters, played some really good footy, was kind of misunderstood, probably at the Roosters, but has come to the Tigers and he's besides Payne Haas, he's the most informed prop in the game. And I think that especially Polynesian players, I think that Benji, I think he's good at communicating with them in particular, because I think he understands kind of their mindset. Not to say that Polynesian players think differently to non-Polynesian players, but I think that I think just coming from his background and the fact that he played the game and the fact that all these players would have seen him play as well, I think he's inherently got that respect because they know him as a player that guys like Adam O'Brien might not necessarily have, because although they are good coaches, the players just don't see them that way. And it's such a tool, isn't it? Because before, and I don't think this gets talked about enough, because before Benji Marshall, we couldn't sign anyone. I mean, we just spend off seasons just begging, hoping that Latrell Mitchell would take a $1.3 million deal. But now that Benji's here and we've got that kind of figurehead with Shane Richardson, we've got Taruva, Luai, May, these are all just 5 out of 5 star signings, and it's just such a different thing to see. So I definitely agree with you. I reckon now that we've got money from the Galvin deal falling apart, I reckon we could attract someone who's got a pretty good reputation in the game, hopefully.
I think you're right, Declan. I think we want to place some importance on that, the Benji influence. But I also think, and you mentioned it, that we need to put Richo in that conversation as well. I think he's got a professionalism about him that the club has never seen before, and others that are dealing with the club would never have experienced before. But can I say, Joel, I reckon you've really hit on something there. And I reckon there's a bit of a shift coming, if it hasn't already arrived, in coaching. And that is the old school, disciplined, rigid, angry coach who growls at you all the time and never smiles. And I think their days are numbered, and I think the more people-friendly, high emotional intelligence type coach is the new generational coach, the guy who can still have higher standards and high expectations, but give the guys a hug and a cuddle and relate to that generation that is coming through. I think they're going to be the more effective coaches as we progress, over the next decade.
Well, we've certainly tried the Madges of the world and it didn't work. And, the funny thing too, we're in a slightly different position because we've got every week a sort of 20-minute inside behind-the-scenes look at what it's like to be a West Tiger through the Terrell May YouTube videos, Declan. I'm sure that you watch them, but other players could see that, and it's actually a chance to see inside the playing group. So you kind of see what you'd be getting into if you came to the West Tigers. And there's some guys there that are really popular amongst the wider NRL fan base as well, and that want to play with the likes of Jerome Luai and Sunia Taruva and the like. But yeah, that Terrell May aspect is something that sort of, if you're at the Gold Coast and you're unhappy and you sort of felt disconnected and underappreciated, and then you're seeing this centre of excellence and all these guys that seem to really enjoy each other's company, or most of these guys that seem to enjoy each other's company, that's something that I don't think we've had before, where a player could sort of get that feel for what's going on at the club.
Yeah, it's funny because the trail vlogs, you would say that they were really good for just marketing of the club in general, but I hadn't quite thought of the players watching that as well and getting a good vibe of the club. So I think that's a good point of view. But yeah, I think we touched on it last week that just the vibe of the team is just much different to last year. And NRL players talk It's not like back in the day when like you kind of only hung out with people at your club. Like these guys are all friends, especially the Sydney teams. Like you have a lot of cross connection, and I think word of mouth, hopefully, of like Benji, although like there's been like pretty like heavy hitters trying to like make it seem like he can't coach. I'm hoping that like guys like Luai coming out and backing him, hopefully that like helps turn the perception around and helps us recruit players because they want to be part of this. And obviously, like at the end of the day, like winning games is going to do that more than anything else. Like if we win games, then people are going to want to come, and we have salary cap space. So if you can pay them the money they're happy with, and then you can like offer them success in their careers, then you're going to get good people. But all this like little like 5% stuff, like the vlogs, like the vibes around the training, like the kind of good press at the moment, like that's just stuff we haven't really had before, and it's nice to see.
Yeah, it's also interesting content, as Eddie said. Like sometimes it's just 5 minutes of Terrell eating a kebab, and Eddie apparently is going to try and start his own vlog just eating kebabs, but so far nobody's subscribed. So. Speaking of Eddie, let's get into Yachty's trivia, because the first question was actually inspired by Eddie, according to Yachty. Yachty, thanks for doing the trivia this week. Since their inception in 1998, what is the Storm's win-loss record in Melbourne when recording a loss the previous week? That's very, very specific, I know. Includes final series and excludes this 2025 season. So I'll give you a hint. There's been 94 games. So 94 games, how many times have the Melbourne Storm recorded a loss, or what is their win-loss record after recording a loss the previous week? So
is it 100%?
At Melbourne?
Yeah.
At Melbourne.
Is it 100% win, 0% loss?
No.
I'd say 90%.
Well, I can't work out the percentages, but it's 76 wins and 18 losses.
Yeah, that's 90%, spot on.
4 of which were against us. You weren't a math teacher, Steve. So don't be smart. True or false? A rugby league player has played for both Melbourne and West Tigers in the same season.
True.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think I remember it, but I can't remember it is.
Well, Declan got in with the true first. You got no hope of naming this guy. I know his name, but I can't remember him playing for us. Dane Morgan. He played 5 games with North Sydney in 1999 and 1 game each with the Storm and with the West Tigers in 2000. But I would not have remembered that.
Didn't Nofaluma go down before?
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Yeah, Yachty.
Yachty.
Get with it, Yachty.
Yachty, you forgot Noffa. All
Do I
right.
get an extra point?
Yachty listens in every week, and he'll be coming
Gotcha,
back.
Yachty. Gotcha, mate.
Exactly. What was the halftime score when we beat the Storm in Melbourne, round 14 in, I think it's 2012. Yeah, it would be 2012. What was the halftime score when we first beat the Storm in Melbourne, round 14, 2012? We ended up winning the game 10 points to 6. So what was the halftime score?
Is it 6-4 to us?
I'll give you the 4 different options.
Okay, sorry.
Was it 0-0 at halftime? Was it 2-2? Was it Melbourne 6, Tigers 0? Or West Tigers 10, Melbourne 6?
I can D.
D. So you're saying a scoreless second half?
C.
And C for Steve? It's actually B. It was 2-2. Unconverted tries from Lottie Dakiri, Matt Utai and Dane Nielsen all came in the second half. So just 2 penalty shots in the first half. Name the 4 NRL West Tigers players who played for us and later appeared in a grand final for the Storm. This includes their stripped premiership years. So there's been 4 West Tigers players that went off and played in a grand final for the Storm.
Addo
Josh
Sean Bloor.
Pappenhausen?
No, not Sean Bloor, not Pappenhausen.
Well, he played grand final last year, didn't he?
Josh Adokar?
No, Sean Bloor.
Sean Bloor. Did he play in the grand final?
Yeah.
Yes, he must have.
I think Yachty was drunk when he did
Yachty's
this.
had a shocker here, so we'll put Sean Glaw down, because I think you're right, Declan. So bonus point for Declan.
I'll tell you what, there's that winger, that Fijian winger. What's his name?
Sevi. But he didn't play. No, he didn't play first grade for us. Marika Corabetti.
Marika Corabetti, yep. He was at the West Tigers from 2012 to 2014, played 16 games, and played in the 2016 grand final for the Storm.
Nick Meaney played for us?
Sorry?
No.
Did Nick Meaney ever play for us?
Nick Meaney never played for us. He played for Newcastle and Canterbury. The late Ryan Tandy was at the West Tigers in 2008, played 2 games, and played in the 2009 grand final for the Storm. And Jeff Lima, right back in the very early days of West Tigers, played for us in 2004, played 2 games, and played in the 2007 and 2009 grand finals at the Storm. He was a good player, Jeff Lima, on his day. All right, last one, and it's the Who Am I? I was born in Sydney in 1976, so what does that make him, 49 today? Debuted in a season where my club celebrated their 90th anniversary. So I debuted in a season where my club celebrated their 90th anniversary. Made 66 appearances in 3 years at that club. Moved onto a merged club and played 42 games in 2 seasons. Signed with a joint venture outfit in a coach's first year at his new club. Stayed and retired there during a premiership year. Made 28 appearances and scored 4 tries. My last NRL game was on the bench of a club's first win during a special winning run. And I had tremendous hands and cool temperament. That was according to Yachty's 2003 Select Footy card. He was a West Tiger back in the early days of Tim Sheen's reign. But I'm giving you that bonus clue, and he was a winger. Declan's no hope.
All yours, Declan. I got no hope.
All right.
I can't even remember what the first thing you said, Joel.
We need more modern day players. As soon as you give me the date of birth and it's before like 1992, I just have no clue.
Yeah. If it happened between 2000 and 2012, Declan doesn't know about it. It doesn't exist. Well, this guy was a part of our 2004 World Sevens West Tigers winning team. So if you've got the picture on your wall of the boys, who's in that picture? Bronson Harrison, Benji Marshall, Darren Center, Pat Richards, Scott Sattler. I think Ben Reynolds is in the photo from memory. Can't think of anybody else is in that photo, but there is one other guy, and that's Robert Miles. Steve, do you remember the name Robert Miles?
No.
No, Yachty certainly does. Robert Miles played for the Roosters between 97 and 2000, the Northern Eagles 2001 to 2002, and the West Tigers 2003 to 2005. And he was part of that triumphant World Sevens tournament winning team.
So I've got one more question for the quiz. How long after Yachty listens to the pod will he contact me to justify the fact that he hasn't made a mistake? Is it A, 1 second, B, half a second?
Sean Glaw, David Nofaluma. Yachty, I think Yachty's distracted, so up your game, Yachty. Thank you for the trivia. That's it, boys. We will reconvene for episode number 400, hopefully after a West Tigers victory this weekend against the, what do they call them? Not the Storm, they call them the Drizzle, or the Bleak City Drizzle. It's another name for the Melbourne Storm. It should be good. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.